Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Root of the Matter. I am your host, Dr. Rachel Carver, and I'm very excited for the first time to have a medical professional talking to us about Chinese medicine. You've all heard me talk over and over again about meridians, how much I really love and look towards Chinese medicine to help with a lot of ailments. So we finally actually have a specialist and expert on to talk a little bit more about the different patterns we see, more about how energy works, and how we can use Chinese medicine with, stem cell therapies and other holistic modalities to really get at the root cause of disease. So, everybody, please welcome Dr. Yi Song. Thank you, Dr. Song, for taking your time today. Why don't you give the audience a little bit idea of how you got into this work and a little bit about your background?
Sure, I'm so happy to be on your show, Dr. Carver. I grew up in China, and my family has 17 generations practicing Chinese medicine, and also my grandparents, they actually were practicing Western medicine in China. So I was influenced in both modalities, both type of different culture, always merging Western with Eastern. And then I also pursued pathology study initially because I really wanted to solve the fundamental root cause of conditions. And your show is called The Root of the Matter. We always try to look for root cause, but however, in Western medicine approach, they usually only treat the symptoms when they arise, and they don't really look into the root cause of the conditions or treat the conditions early on before any severe symptoms even arise. So that's what prompted me to pursue my Chinese medicine route in my family. So that's why I have been practicing traditional Chinese medicine in Boston for the past 25 years. But then about 8 years ago, I discovered stem cell lab in Colombia by chance, introduced to the lab. And then I started treating my mom first with the stem cell treatment. And it was very powerful because at that time we couldn't even solve her problem with traditional Chinese medicine. So that's how I started studying stem cell treatment and also how the stem cell treatment fits into the philosophy of traditional Chinese medicine. So that's how I came around. And now I'm offering both stem cell treatment and also combining the traditional Chinese medicine plus other holistic modalities to help people live healthier longer.
Yeah, and which is what we really need, especially in today's day and age, especially when we're seeing our children, coming down with all these ailments at such a young age. I have teenage daughters, and, one of them just came down with the flu. And this had happened at the beginning of the year, too. She was, started playing soccer, and first week of school, she was out with the flu. Now, the first week of softball season, she's out with the flu. And I just keep thinking, ugh, what's going on with the immune system, right? Why isn't there the resilience there? And granted, she's a teenager, so she doesn't eat perfectly. She won't take her supplements. She's eating all sorts of weird junk, putting all sorts of weird things on her body. But for me, I'm always thinking, what's underlying that weakened immune system that she's getting sick so easily? Maybe we could start with talking a little bit about what are the main differences in Chinese medicine versus the Western medicine approach?
So I just recently published a abridged version of my book that's coming up. So it's called The Six Principles to Natural Longevity. So the six principles are, number one, you need to recognize your body's constitution because everybody's body is different. And then once you recognize your body's constitution, you can address the weakness and also moderate the excess in your body. So then you can actually start looking into early prevention because you already understand what your body constitution is. Part of it is related to the genetic composition. Like nowadays we have more genetic testing, but it's now only about genetic testing. And then when you try to do the early prevention, that's the second principle, is actually you try to look into what's the imbalance in your body. Just like, you mentioned your daughter who has been getting sick very easily. I don't know whether she's getting sick even when she was younger. And so then we need to look into what's causing her immune system is weak or what's causing you getting eczema. And I actually also has a predisposition to eczema since I was born. And so you need to address your body's imbalance that's causing these minor symptoms. Then you address them early so that they don't develop into severe conditions. And that actually goes to the third principle, which is actually treating the root cause of the conditions. Because if you recognize the root cause and then you start treating the root cause early, that's when you can really prevent the degenerative conditions associated with aging. So a lot of people, they wait until their joints are already completely worn out. Then they say, oh, can stem cell help me? I don't want to do the joint replacement. And then in Western medicine, they just simply give you the steroid injection first. And then if you keep getting steroid injection and eventually it doesn't work, then they do the joint replacement for the knee, shoulder, or hip. But then for a lot of other joints, there's no joint replacement. So then you just have to suffer. So then the fourth principle would be after you treat the root cause, you address the early prevention, then you actually start looking into your body as a garden. So now just as a machine. So you don't just try to replace the parts that's not working because it doesn't really work that way. It's a human body. It's an organic garden. So you need to address a lot of conditions from distal area that actually causing what you're experiencing, because the garden is like have a holistic irrigation system. And if certain area of the irrigation system is blocked, then you may show up the symptoms somewhere far away, but that doesn't mean your root cause is only in the area where you have the symptoms. So you have to look at the far away blockage. And a lot of times the blockage is related to the emotional stress, the balance of the whole body, the mind body balance. So that's when it comes to like you really need to address the mental wellness. And then we're actually starting to address a lot of mental wellness even in the Western medicine. But still, it's not enough because they don't really realize that a lot of chronic conditions are the results of the long-term emotional stress on your body. So then the fifth principle goes to that you actually need to make your body in harmony with the nature, with the environment, so that you are now swimming against the current, weakening your body further. So we need to actually start looking into a human body as part of the environment, the universe. And then that's when the human body can be functioning the optimized condition when you apply all the other 5 principles. So the last principle would be that you actually want to use all the methods available to us, combining all of them in the right proportion according to your particular body. And then that's when you can actually address your body's particular condition and also achieve the optimal health.
Yes, that's fantastic. So when you're talking about constitution, that made me think about like Ayurvedic medicine too, that has the doshas, but I'm not as familiar. Are there, and in Ayurveda, there's the 3 doshas. Is there a subset of certain constitutions that people fall into like that?
I think actually the dosha type, like, I don't know the real name of them, like kappa or,
Yep.
it's very similar. It has similar concepts. So let's talk about eczema again, because you mentioned you had eczema. That's how you got into Chinese medicine. I actually was born having eczema since I was born. And even nowadays, I still had a little bit of eczema flare up from time to time. So for example, for people who tend to have eczema or certain skin conditions, they usually have damp heat body type. So that's one type of body. And then in Ayurvedic, sometimes they talk about the kapha, and then I think it has certain overlapping concepts.
Mhm.
But basically, some people, they fall into having more heat in the body, and some people falling into they have more cold in the body. And that has to do with digestive system, also have to do with your prenatal energy you inherited from your parents. So that's what constitution talks about. So that's when, if you want to recognize your body's constitution, you actually need to do the complete traditional Chinese medicine evaluation. So that includes talking about your health history, also looking at the tongue, feeling your pulse, or even just looking at your complexion and also the body type. So all those things go into the constitution.
And I mean, it's so much more holistic, right? I know that's one of the first things sometimes an acupuncturist will say to you is like, stick out your tongue. People are like, what? But right, we can see like the whole digestive system right on the tongue. And for years, I've always had, depending on who you look at, right? If you go to the dentist, they say, oh, you have tooth marks because you have apnea, but they're not the traditional type. In Chinese medicine, those tooth marks can also be right as the liver, gallbladder. And I think that's something that, with my eczema and all that, that's always, been an issue too. So I appreciate that much in the dental field, being able to understand a little bit about the meridians where we can assess other areas of the body just looking in the mouth. And even like the texture, the moisture, all of those things in the mouth can tell us a lot about somebody's constitution, if I'm right. Do you look at
Yes.
people's mouths, and what do you look for when you're looking in the mouth?
So even like some people, if they have certain dental conditions, like if they tend to get infections in the gum, it's not because they have bad hygiene for their teeth. A lot of times it also has to do with their predisposition to gum infections. So that actually goes to the connection of teeth and mouth health to heart condition. And then when you mention like the teeth marks along the sides of the tongue, the sides of the tongue are related to the gallbladder liver meridians. However, the teeth mark on the sides of the tongue actually relates to digestive system weakness. And I always have the teeth mark on the tongue because I actually was born with digestive system weakness. And that's why I also tend to have the damp heat. That's why since I was born, I had eczema. And then I didn't have eczema for a long time. And then within the past 10 years, I will probably get some small eczema outbreak on my neck area, like when I was really stressed out. But I haven't really figured out what was exactly the trigger for that. But when it comes out, I do have ways to treat it. And then I never used the cortisone cream, like usually most dermatologists would ask you to do when they see, oh, you have eczema, just use this.
Mhm, because we know those topical steroids, and for me, it didn't even really help that much, but having a steroid, whether you're ingesting it or putting it on your body, on your skin, suppresses your immune system, right? And so what is that?
Yes.
That's kind of then, the way I understand it, that's actually pushing the toxin or whatever it is deeper in the body, right? So although maybe you get a little relief, you're certainly not fixing the problem and potentially making it worse in the long term, right? Because you're not actually
Also,
improving it.
yeah. And also, you can now use the steroid cream for a long period of time because it's cortisone. So, if you use it for a long time, it makes your skin thinner and weakens your other connective tissue. It's bad for your joint, bad for your bone. And on top of that, it's really now treating the root cause why you're getting, say, dermatitis or eczema or even psoriasis, a lot of various type of skin conditions. Because the root cause, like we discussed earlier, most eczema, the root cause is related to the weakness in the digestive system. So because your digestive system is weak, that's when your body accumulates some dampness, and when it combined with heat in certain condition, it would manifest as skin conditions.
And I would assume like acne is the same root there in Chinese medicine. Is that also a damp heat kind of thing, or is that different?
For most people having very bad acne as teenagers or in their 20s, they definitely have heat inside the body. But then depending on different type of the acne, because the acne that is very, very severe and red with no pus, then that type of acne would be more heat. But if you have the acne that has a lot of white heads and then it oozes the fluid, then that's the dampness in combining with heat in that type. So when you treat acne, like when I was in my 20s, I also had pretty bad acne for a while, but I didn't take any Western medication for that. That's actually when I started using traditional Chinese medicine to treat myself. Of course, before that, I was always using traditional Chinese medicine to treat my coughing issue. When I got sick, I would have prolonged coughing after um, the infection was already gone. And then since I also had some kind of kidney condition when I was 6 years old, so my parents would tend to put me on antibiotics. and then none of the antibiotics will work for me. So that's when I actually started using Chinese medicine to help my coughing after upper respiratory infection. But then when I was in my 20s, I was already in the United States and I was studying pathology, but then I had very bad acne outbreaks. That's when I started using the herbal medicine to treat my damp heat. And then that actually resolved my acne for most of the time. So I didn't have very bad acne outbreak after I took the herbal medicine for maybe a few months. And then I would just tweak it. Like when I have some outbreak, then I would use it. So that's how I controlled my acne.
That's great. So one of the other conditions we often see on the tongue is something we call in Western medicine, geographic tongue. And,
Mm-hmm.
most traditional, conventional Western medicine, like, it's fine. It's just a benign condition, but, not everybody has that. So and to me, when I'm seeing that again, I'm thinking digestive and more, even like a lot of autoimmune kind of things. What does a geographic tongue mean to you? And so for people who aren't familiar with that term, it's kind of like you see almost islands of red. You've lost some of the mucosa on the top of the tongue, so you kind of see outlines of circles and stuff. And usually it doesn't hurt, but it looks strange.
So I think for some people, actually, they were born with geographic tongue. So if they had the geographic tongue since they were born, sometimes it may not indicate any bad situation going on inside internally. But then if people sometimes they didn't have geographic tongue since they were born and then they started developing these patches, then that would indicate certain condition because most times you don't know, like, because you look at people's tongue way more than I see. They always open their mouths when you treat them. So do you notice like probably women when they're in their menopause, they probably tend to have more patches on their tongue. So that actually indicates menopausal related condition, which is more like indeficiency, estrogen declining. That's what the patches on the tongue may indicate. Or people with a lot of um, liver young rising obstruction, like when I mentioned earlier, your body is like a garden. So when you have emotional stress, then your body have more obstruction in the irrigation system. So when you have that obstruction for a long term, that's when your tongue will show certain redness spots on the sides. And then when you have that liver obstruction for a long term, then it also can create the yin deficiency that will show the patches in the middle of the tongue.
Yes, and that's a common thing. I think, every once in a while I get the red patch kind of at the tip. And I think I'm definitely somebody who suffers from the yin deficiency. My whole constitution is much more yang. And so yin, we think of that as the feminine energy, right? Whereas yang, we think of that
Yes.
as masculine energy.
Yes.
And so why would somebody like me, who's a woman, who should maybe technically have more yin energy, why do some people suffer from yin deficiency?
So you say you have more yang, right? Is that
Yes,
what you're
right.
okay? So most people having indeficiency is related to, especially for women after menopause. Then most of women, because they have the declining in the estrogen, then that's related to the declining in the feminine part or the yin part. So that's when a lot of women going through menopause, they would tend to have hot flashes, cannot sleep well at night because at night it's a yin time. So if your yin energy is not strong enough, then that's when you cannot have good night's sleep and you keep waking up. And then also if you have night sweats, that's definitely points to yin deficiency.
And there are definitely remedies. Do you think are there specific maybe nutritional interventions? Are there obviously you could get on hormone replacement therapy and that really does a lot for evening out those symptoms there. Are there but some people maybe shy away from that? Are there nutritional things that as somebody who might be entering that stage of their life or and again, I'm not menopausal yet, but I still suffer from those kind of symptoms sometimes. Do you think there are
Okay.
nutrition
Yeah. So if you are not menopausal yet, but then you already have some yin deficiency showing up, That's called early prevention, and also recognize your body's constitution. So now what we need to do is for you to take in nourishing food. So we have, say, black sesame, walnuts, or even some herbal formulas that can further strengthen your in part and also moderate your yang axis. Because the reason people are having, say, hot flashes or feeling hot a lot, and then at night wake up, not being able to fall back asleep, then in that part, you actually want to moderate the excess of the yang as well. So we do have formulas, and then again, each formula is addressed, customized to each person's constitution. But then we have general formula saying, oh, this can tonify yin.
Mhm. Yes, there's a lot. When you start going down that rabbit hole on Google, it it gets very confusing. You can't really treat yourself with Chinese medicine. You really need to have, an expert because, like you said, you really want the whole history, right? Maybe you were born with something. I never had eczema until after my second daughter, but I had skin issues my whole life, but I'd never had eczema per se. But again, it's just another form. My one daughter who keeps getting sick, she has since she's been young, a tendency to have viral illnesses. And she has had some weird skin things too. So that's why it's really important that you meet with a practitioner who will take your entire history into account because that's what gives us the clues about your predisposition, about, more than what's going on. Because one isolated symptom just isn't enough to really understand how the whole body is working.
Exactly. For example, if your daughter, since she was born, she tended to have viral infection. So that actually means she may have some lung weakness as well,
Mm.
because the lungs are in Chinese medicine, the energetic level, the lungs are the organ that controls the defensive energy surrounding your body or circulating in the human body on the surface to defend the body from the exogenous pathogen invading. So that's the other side. So if you have some certain lung energy weakness from birth, which I actually have too, but maybe not as severe as what you're mentioning about your daughter who keeps getting sick, then the lung energy is also associated with the digestive system. So it's possible that she also has some digestive system weakness since birth
Definitely.
that also contributes to the lung energy weakness that makes her more susceptible to getting viral infections.
Absolutely. And I know I had my kids kind of back to back. And after she was born, I was back to work in 4 weeks. Right. So I never, we don't ever, especially in Western culture, we don't put a much effort into the mother, after birth. It's all about the baby, right? And we, in some cultures, right, the mothers eat the placenta and they have breasting and certain, tonics that we have. Whereas in Western medicine, it's just, it's all about the baby. So
The placenta in Chinese medicine, thousands of years ago, they actually dried up the placenta and then use it as a tonic to people who are very weak, or even for women after they give birth, they become kind of weak, depleted in energy. Then placenta can give the postpartum recovery to women and also to people who are suffering from chronic illnesses that their energy was depleted. Okay, so in Chinese medicine, the herbal medicine, there's an ingredient. The Chinese name is called 紫河车, which means purple dragon, purple card in the river. But I don't know why they call it. I think because the placenta, once you dried it up, it looks a little bit purplish. And then it's because it's rounded, so it looks like a kind of a vehicle in the river.
mhm,
So that particular ingredient, they actually dried up the placenta after the baby is born. So they took the placenta and then dried it up, and then they grind it into powder. Then they can use that powder in formula to strengthen people's weakness when they have chronic illness that weaken their source energy, their body's energy, or even women after giving birth that, because like you mentioned, you gave birth to your 3 children back to back. So that also depletes your body's energy as well. So that's when the placenta powder would be used in Chinese medicine to strengthen people's constitutional energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then, because I had the farm in Colombia since 9 years ago, and we actually have cows because we have a big area that if we don't have cows, the grass will grow wildly and it's very time consuming to mow the lawn. So then we just have the cows eating all the grass. So then the cow we have has already given birth to 4 babies so far. She, every single time after she gave birth to the baby cow, she would eat up the whole umbilical cord and placenta. So even the animal has a basic instinct knowing that placenta and umbilical cord is very nutritious for the mother.
Interesting. And kind of along those lines too, right? Saying can inherit these weakens your chi, right? Which is kind of,
Yes,
if you can
the
describe as
energy.
life force energy, right? And we tend to that kind of we think about that in our kidneys, basically, but that is inherited. So if your mother, grandmother, ancestors had weaker energy, then you're kind of born, with less energy. So, and this is what I suspect for myself too, always having had, even for years before I ever had any symptom, other than the acne, I'd always have a little bit of like blood in my urine too, even though you couldn't see it, but it would be like on a test at the doctor's office. And
Oh,
so I
okay.
was like, I think there was and I used to always wake up almost every morning, even when I was in my early 20s, having low back pain. Now knowing what I know now, I always
Okay.
think, oh, I think I have an inherent kidney, weakness, so a lower chi.
Yes.
So for someone like me, it's not necessarily surprising that I would develop an eczema or have a little bit of these weaknesses. And if we do inherit these, are there ways to rebuild our chi? Is there a way to kind of overcome some of these inherited weaknesses that we may have?
There are definitely ways that you can do from now, early, not waiting until you're 60 to address your weakness since birth. So, the good example would be my mother. My mother actually was born during the Civil War in China, and my grandmother didn't have enough food at that time, and she was actually in the Communist Revolution Center. So my mother was born with softness in her bone. So the top of her head didn't even heal until like 1 year after she was born. So she always had this deficiency in her body. And then when she was a teenager, it was during the famine time in China because Chairman Mao has certain movement. So my mother always had deficiencies. But then, of course, when my mother was in her 30s and 40s, she didn't really pay attention to address all these weaknesses she already knew she had. So that's why about 6 years ago, she started having all these conditions that we couldn't even solve with acupuncture or herbal medicine anymore because of the weakness she already accumulated up to that time. That was like when she was around 75. So that's when we started looking into stem cell treatment for her. And it was just because I was introduced to the lab and then she had the condition in her leg that was so painful and we couldn't find any solutions. So we used the stem cell for her and then she really recovered very well within the months from that conditions she was suffering for the 2 years prior to the stem cell treatment. So even though, say, you have inherent weakness from birth, constitutionally, like you have low energy in kidney, then you can still postnatally address these problems. If you address them early enough, like say in your 30s and 50s, then you will be able to prevent your body from deteriorating faster than other people because when other people, they start with higher level in their energy, then when they decline, they don't decline as fast.
So you were saying your mom, what did you treat her for? She had she had those weaknesses.
My mother has a lot of problems because of her congenital birth energy deficiency. She has very severe osteoporosis, but she never got on any osteoporosis medication. Now she's 81 years old and she never broke a bone. We basically use holistic treatment. We started when she was in her 50s using herbal medicine to supplement her weakness, the kidney energy weakness. So she has been doing remarkably well for somebody who has so much weakness since she was born. So my point is the story is about basically if you address things early enough. Of course, my mom didn't start addressing it early enough, but at least it's never too late. It's never too early. Right? So if you realize now, and then you start addressing it now, since we have so much higher technology now than 6,000 years ago or even 2,000 years ago. So we can certainly supplement your kidney energy, especially with a lot of modern technologies available, including like, you can take supplements, you can take formulas that can be prepared with high-tech technology. Even Chinese herbal formulas nowadays, they have like high-tech Chinese herbal formula. Then you can also, on top of that, you can also use placenta and some other things to supplement your kidney energy, because since I started doing stem cell treatment for people for their anti-aging purpose or even for particular conditions they're looking for help with, I realized, like I mentioned, the cow, they also even eats the placenta after giving birth. Basically, the umbilical cord and placenta, they have the energy, the original energy from the baby that actually can help supplement the declining kidney energy associated with aging. So aging is inevitable, but we can slow down the aging process and then also prevent the aging related degenerative conditions. Then we can enjoy life, enjoy high quality health span instead of just having the lifespan.
Yeah. So with the stem cell therapy, so like for your mom who had the osteoporosis, were you injecting stem cells into joints, or how did you treat her with stem cells?
So the first time she had stem cell treatment was because she had knee pain. She also had leg pain. That's the particular condition I mentioned earlier that we couldn't find any solution for it. And I knew for that type of condition, if we didn't treat it, now it has been like 7 years since she started having that problem. If we didn't treat with stem cell back then, I think she would have had amputation by now, because I knew other people who had similar conditions, they eventually had to have amputation because of the ulcer developing from the chronic inflammation in the lower leg. So we did inject stem cells into her knee joint because she has been having osteoarthritis of the knees since probably 15 years ago. And we have been using acupuncture, herbal spray, herbal medicine to help her knees up till about 6 or 7 years ago. But then she developed this lower leg issue that we tried everything and it didn't give her very good results. And then only the stem cell gave her the boost to the energy. So since we're talking about the kidney energy, I already mentioned the stem cells or the energy from the placenta umbilical cord is more like supplementing your body's declining kidney energy with the newborn baby's energy, because they're from the newborn babies. Of course, it's not directly from the baby, but it's part of the newborn baby's life nurturing process that's in the umbilical cord and placenta. And then also the umbilical cord and placenta can also supplement your body's declining energy so that your body's kidney energy declines slower. It's more like adding the wood into the cauldron, because for anybody from birth till death, the kidney energy is declining like a cauldron. So eventually when you die, basically the cauldron's fire goes out. That's the end of that particular person's life. But the energy, the life cycle goes on the earth.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's fascinating, right, to think, younger kids can get away with, more illnesses or whatever because they have more stem cells, right? And that's right, that's why we kind of see aging as we hit 40, we're really, our stem cells are really declining rapidly. So we start to have all those itises, right? And, our eyesight starts declining, right? The sleep is a problem. So, I think one of the important takeaways from here is we've got to do this early, right? In our in our 30s and our early 40s, we need to do things that are going to help maintain those energy batteries, right? That's why exercise is so
Yes.
important, right? Our muscles act like rechargeable batteries, right? Especially as we get older, you always hear it say, you got to lift heavier weights, you got to preserve your muscle mass, because that's where, which is one thing we see with these new GLP-1s all over the place. One of the major side effects is muscle wasting. So, it's really scary. You're losing your energy batteries. So obviously, it's not healthy to be overweight, but I think a lot of people may not realize that's such a, a big side effect. So it's really important that you are, lifting and making sure you're maintaining muscle mass so that we don't, get rid of our energy batteries even more quickly than just normal aging.
I think the problem with GLP-1 is most people they are using too high dose. I think if you do the microdosing, which actually for most people when you get the prescription pen or anything, the lowest dosage is like 5 milligram per injection. That is just too high for a lot of people. And GLP-1 actually is a very good peptide for anti-aging purpose when you do very small amount. So I myself actually have been using 1 milligram per week, or sometimes I even forget doing it. So I probably do 1 milligram every 2 weeks. And I feel it has very good anti-aging effects combining with a lot of other regimens I do. I don't do tons of supplement or anything. I'm never a supplement person because I feel if you can get the ingredients from the natural food and natural herbs, why do you need to take supplement? Plus, sometimes when you get the supplement, you don't know what's in it. So, but I do find GLP-1, if you do microdosing, it has very good anti-aging effects. But unfortunately, a lot of people, they don't look at it that way and then they use too high dose. That's what happens with the muscle wasting,
Mhm.
all these other side effects, nausea, which is very bad for digestive system. So that goes back to the digestive system energetically in Chinese medicine, because digestive system is the foundation for your body's energy. So if you weaken the digestive system with using GLP-1 too high dose, you're actually weakening your whole body's nourishment. So that's why you get the muscle wasting.
Thank you very much. I think that's so important to understand, and why, again, things like Chinese medicine, when we are personalizing this to you, is very important. And this is why so many pharmaceuticals have so many side effects, because it's like, yeah, everybody who has high blood pressure, just take this medication, right? Whereas we're so individual and we need to really understand our body's constitution, and then we can maybe able to use pharmaceuticals, but again, we really need to dial into our specific conditions, to try to avoid those things. Super, real,
Exactly.
yeah,
And
that's
for
amazing.
for most common hypertension or high cholesterol, most people you don't even need to take the medication because again, those medications are just masking the symptoms. And nowadays we even have more and more research showing that taking the statin drug to lower cholesterol actually is not good for older people because you actually need the cholesterol for your brain function.
Yes, yes, we've talked about that many times on this podcast, and that's exactly what the research shows. Like, okay, guys, what is the real problem? And cholesterol is so vital to every single cell in the body. So, we've got to get away from this fear tactic, like, oh my gosh, it's over 200. I just had one of my friends was concerned because he was having a lot of high cholesterol, and he was having like calcification scores, and he was very nervous about this. He was very health conscious, and the doctors like just wanted him to be on a statin, and he was like, well, what if I just do it for like a couple months just to get it down? And I said, you can do whatever it's your body. I'm telling you what I know, and that and it was barely over 200. It wasn't up to the 300 range or anything. So I said I wouldn't really worry about it. Let's think about what else is going on. And today he just sent me his new lab, and they were perfect. And he said, all I've done is tweaked my diet a little bit. He was eating a lot of oxalates, which can build a lot of
Mm,
excess calcium. And it was all like
yes.
healthy smoothies and healthy powders. And then I was like, whoa. I was like, I know all of those ingredients, right? Like almonds and raspberries and green, like, spinach and all these are good for us, but maybe in some people's their metabolism, they can't get through the oxalates quickly enough, right? So I said, well, let's change that out just a little bit. And then he started doing some tapping. because I was like, all of this fear that you're having, this emotional stress, is going to cause a bigger problem. It's going to cause more of that inflammation.
Exactly.
So he said he started doing the tapping. So with the minor tweak in a diet, and I mean, he's been religiously tapping, and all his numbers in 1 month completely normalized. Right. So
Yeah, a lot of
you
people,
need
if
the
they
proof.
go on the statin drug, they basically have to be on it for the rest of their life. Once they go off it, then their cholesterol shoots up because your body doesn't know what to do by itself. But your body is designed to heal itself if you do the right thing.
Exactly. It's just there's just so much, confusion. I had another patient this morning and she's like, very health aware, trying to do the right thing, but she's like, I just so confusing. There's so much information out there. And again, it's important while we have a lot of great information on the internet, if you really don't understand how your body works, you're gonna, spiral out and cause all little and then you cause more of the emotional stress, right? Which just further worsens, all of the symptoms. So, is there something
Exactly.
in Chinese medicine? Well, obviously there is, because one of my favorite things for my nervous system is Qigong. And if I
Hmm.
don't do my 15 minutes of Qigong every morning, I'm starting the day here. It doesn't take very much, right, to flip me into that stress mode. So, talk to me a little bit about maybe how Chinese medicine integrates into the mind body.
Sure. So I don't know where you studied Qigong and how long you've been doing it. I actually started doing Qigong when I was a teenager because my family influenced me and they had Qigong masters visiting our family, treating my aunt who has a lot of issues. So that's when I started learning about meditation and Qigong. But then I also learned about the philosophy underlying all these practices. So the philosophy that is the foundation for Chinese medicine, Qigong, Tai Chi, all these things, is the Taoism philosophy, which actually tells you you need to follow the natural flow, the natural rhythm. So that's one of the principles I mentioned in my book, The Six Principles, is to follow the natural rhythm. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier saying, like, you don't want to swim against the current because if you find the right moment that you can get the tailwinds or the current to push you to achieve to where you want to go, then why do you want to choose the wrong time to swim against the current? But a lot of times in Western culture, people don't look at things that way. They just think, okay, as long as I try really hard, I will be able to achieve something. But you have to look at the right timing, the right moment. And also, you don't want to stress yourself out because if you weaken your body, you swim against current, you actually not only do you not able to achieve what you want to get to, but also weakens your body and then you get chronic disease from the chronic stress. So that's what we want. We don't want. And that's why the importance of keeping the irrigation system in your garden, the whole body flowing correctly. That's very important. And that has to do with keeping a very calm mind and not getting stressed out about a lot of situations, trying to look at things in different perspectives so that you can keep your energy flow better. Even I think I still get stressed at certain moments, but then I will remind myself, you need to slow down and then don't look at things this way and look at it from another angle. Then you just think, let's just follow the flow and then things will change at the right moment. So that's when you actually can have better perspective of whatever is going on in your situation and then find out the best solution as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's the biggest thing that all of us can learn, is just taking up when we get to those moments where we feel stress, is recognizing what we're feeling, and really kind of get out of that limbic system of the brain, right? And try to get into the calming and understand that going with the flow, that's how things, sometimes we might get caught in our own stories like, oh, everything is going wrong and I'm so overwhelmed and blah, blah, blah. And that's the same idea of going against the stream. So if you're like, okay, this is where I'm in,
Exactly.
let me go with the flow. And that's something I've really had to learn a lot, like let go of the control, let things be. When I am more, things just work out so much better when you're in a calm mind, when you can look at things more logically, when you can stop that, going into that primitive limbic system emotional turmoil, we all end up, and that's such a key component to health, right? That again, in most Western medicine is completely disregarded. And we're just always treating the
Exactly.
symptoms instead of really looking at the upstream mental emotional component that is every thought, right, is energy. We don't really think of it that way, but it is. It's absolute energy. And that can create that stuckness that you were talking about, right? We talk about in Chinese medicine, like there's the six healing sounds, right? And certain emotions get stuck in certain organs, I think liver is a big one. People, if you're feeling like angry and irritable and resentful all the time, in Chinese medicine, we tend to think, what's happening? Do we have liver stagnation? Do we, liver heat, the yang rising? Oh, there's all these different conditions. Or, right, lungs can be grief related. With my daughter, if she has a lung weakness, is there some kind of grief that she maybe even inherited from someone else? And it's another way to look at the body and try to uproot some cause, right? Is again looking at that emotional connection as well. You talked about like the teeth and gum disease related to the heart, right? So is there some inherent, heart, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a heart condition, but what are the emotions around love, and support and all those kind of things, that do we need to address some of that in order to address the gum disease? And even a cavitation surgery and an old wisdom tooth, that's right on the heart and small intestine meridian too. So there's all these really great links, and Chinese medicine is one fabulous way to really look deeper at the body and really understand all the different interconnectedness to the body's emotions and physiology. So we're kind of coming up onto our hour here. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us that's important? And then please tell us more about your books and where we can find you.
So I have my hardbound book coming out in a few months because we're still in the editing phase right now. However, I already have the abridged version I mentioned. So if you just want to know the 6 principles, this is an easy read. And you can get this on Amazon, also on my website as well. It has the ebook, the Kindle ebook word version you can download so you can read on your computer. And then I also made the 6 principles pamphlet book, which each one is only 30 pages. So it's very easy for people to grab one to read it and then understand the principle. And sometimes we need reminders from time to time because people just forget, right? So for your listeners, if they go to gift.regeneration effect, they can actually get this Tend Your Body Like a Garden download free. And then from there, if they're interested in learning more about other principles, they can either get the abridged version or the other pamphlets.
That's great. And you do have a clinic in Boston. Are you seeing new patients?
I'm in Boston probably 1 week per month. And then the other time I will be in Colombia where I do the stem cell treatment. So I do see some people in Boston when I am in Boston. So if any people who are interested in having a consultation with me to find out their constitution and what kind of early prevention action they can take to treat their root cause, we can actually also have a complimentary 15-minute consultation. If you go to that link, gift.regenerationeffect.com, once you get the free download, there's on the bottom, there is a place saying, yes, I want the complimentary 15-minute conversation with Dr. Song to find out what's the next step we can take. So you can also do that.
Fantastic. And we'll have all of that right in the show notes for everybody to find that link. So I hope everybody learned a little something there and maybe can think a little bit more deeply about anything you may be dealing with. And thank you so much to Dr. Song for taking time today to chat with us and teach us. And I encourage you to check out her books and start learning all this good stuff on your own. So thank you, Dr. Song, and thank you for all you listeners. And we hope to see you on the next episode.
Thank you for having me sharing my ideas.